Star Wars, a series that needs no introduction. Something that since 1977 has ruled the box office and public discourse. Out of all the many iconic characters, none are more prevalent and iconic than Luke Skywalker, the original protagonist, and Darth Vader, the original antagonist. These two also share the likely two most iconic duels as well, with their duel in Empire Strikes Back and their duel in Return of the Jedi. Out of these, pretty much everybody on planet Earth agrees that Vader had a massive advantage over Luke in their first fight, but their second fight in Return of the Jedi has always been somewhat controversial. Some believe them to be equals, some believe that Vader was stronger and simply conflicted, and some believe that Luke had surpassed his father. So this video will take an opportunity to look into who was really stronger, at least in the Disney canon, meaning anything after 2014 and the things from before that are considered part of Disney's version of the lore. Now, let's take a look at this. I'd imagine like everyone watching this has seen the original fight, but just to make absolutely certain, I'll give a brief overview of the fight. Luke and Vader fight pretty evenly at the start. Luke manages to get Vader off balance and kicks him down. The two continue fighting. Luke points out Vader's likely conflicted. Vader tells Luke not to lower his defenses and they continue fighting and continue clashing pretty evenly. Vader then decides to mention Leia, saying that if Luke will not turn, that Leia might, which gets Luke very upset as he takes this point to beat up Vader and completely dominate him, cutting off his mechanical hand. From this, we see the basics of the argument. For Luke, it's that he literally won, and for Vader, it's that he could keep up while still conflicted. As well as this, it is very much implied that Luke has a dark side amp, as Sidious cackles that Luke is letting his hate flow through him. Now we have to look into the other sources like the novels and the guides to try to come to a conclusion. First, taking a look at Luke's side of the argument. Starting off, let's look at the revamped Fact Files 5th issue, which states that Luke was more than a match for Vader and gained the upper hand, also saying that Vader could not defend against him and was drove back. In Return of the Jedi, Beware the Power of the Dark Side, it's mentioned that he was beating Vader even before Leia was mentioned, that he changed the flow of his attack to surprise Vader and mess up his balance, and that Vader is even gaining additional strength from fear. In the Return of the Jedi Jr. novelization, it stated that Luke had sensed that he had the advantage as he parried all of Vader's blows. In Family at War, it stated that when he gave into his rage, he completely demolished Vader, with Return of the Jedi, 6 stories in 1, saying that Vader could not do anything against Luke. The Star Wars Annual 2017 says that he was more than a match. The First Fact File says that Vader's power faltered against Luke, and Star Wars Made Easy says that he could have destroyed Vader had he wanted to, and Star Wars in 100 Scenes says that he battered Vader's defenses. I know that was a rapid fire of a bunch of statements, but just to give a basic overview of these, it's pretty much saying that he was able to fight Vader, kind of dominate him, especially at the end where he could have even destroyed him. Before that was already more than a match, battering his defenses, parrying his attacks, and knocking him off balance. However, it is of course mentioned that he did give into his hate and his rage during this fight. However, these are not the only arguments for Luke, as there are arguments from the movie itself based off of where Yoda says that he had completed his training and was ready to fight Vader, with Obi-Wan also thinking that Luke could beat him. And we also know that as an apprentice, Luke was likely superior to Vader, with Family at War stating that he was stopped by Sidious as a more powerful apprentice than Vader, with the same thing being stated as a fact in the Fact Files. Of course, this is pretty much a blatant plot point in the movie, so it is pretty clear that he is a superior apprentice, though I'll go into the implications of that more later on. For a few other things, we know that Vader thinks that Luke could possibly beat Sidious, even though Vader pretty much sees himself as powerless against him, with Dave Filoni even thinking that a dark side amp Luke could have killed Sidious. Now, to give both sides of the argument, let's explain some of the counter-arguments to Luke's stance. Starting off, Obi-Wan's statement might not really correlate to Vader as of Return of the Jedi, as he's only really familiar with fighting a New Hope Vader, who is weaker than Return of the Jedi, and was fighting cautiously. The training being completed is also in reference to beating Empire Strikes Back Vader, and since, as I mentioned before, Vader continues to get stronger, even explicitly reaching the height of his power in Return of the Jedi, it wouldn't really apply to that era. And while Luke could have an advantage during the fight, it was likely due to him being dark side amped, while Vader was nerfed. Luke being a better apprentice could definitely just be because of his potential, as we know that Vader has had his potential somewhat squandered by the loss of his limbs, while Luke is much younger and has much more flesh, so it's likely that that could be an interpretation for it instead. The same argument can be made for Vader counting on Luke's potential to beat Sidious, rather than Luke actually being stronger than or at his level right now, and we know that by Return of the Jedi, Vader no longer struggles to resist Sidious's will, so even if he did scale, or if him or Luke could take on Sidious individually, it's likely he would rather have Luke do it just because of how Sidious manipulates him. Filoni's statement can be questioned as well, as he didn't work on Return of the Jedi, and could be talking about a further level of Luke's darkside amp than what he actually used in the fight against Vader, since it's in context if he had actually killed Vader, which we know Luke was not so immersed in the dark side that he couldn't resist doing in the actual fight. Lastly, I just want to make this clear, conflict does not make Vader more powerful. It's even stated that Sidious uses it to weaken him so that when Vader is unconflicted, he will be especially powerful. Of course, now it's time to cover Vader's arguments. To start off, we know that in the fight, they were fairly evenly matched, though we do know there was an advantage towards Luke. However, Vader was stated to be faster in the Return of the Jedi storybook, and we also know that he had the dark side amp earlier in the fight than most people think, with Sidious explicitly stating that hate was flowing through him, and with it being stated that in Return of the Jedi, beware the power of the dark side, that he was winning, though only by using the power of the dark side, which would even confirm that without this power, he would not have been winning. Another statement from Return of the Jedi storybook also directly says that Luke had realized too late that he had done just what the Emperor wanted, and that he had given into his hate, confirming that the Emperor's statement is not just conjecture, but straight up true. That same source, Beware the Power of the Dark Side, also states that Vader was simply pushing forward and driving Luke backwards. Of course, this is where the confliction argument comes in, with Vader being stated to be conflicted and not showing set emotions in A Family at War and the Star Wars databank. We also know that Luke's presence will gradually weaken Vader more and more, which was stated in the Star Wars book. So likely, as the fight progresses, he gets weakened more and more. It would also likely mean that he would be more conflicted than he was after Empire Strikes Back, where it was directly stated that his weakness had returned. We also know that he did not expect Luke's savageness, implying he could have been taken off guard during the fight. According to Snoke, Vader also straight up would have killed Luke had he not succumbed to emotion, basically meaning straight up that at least in his mind, Vader was definitively above Luke, possibly even the dark side Luke. The comic adaptation of The Last Jedi, issue number 4, also suggests that Luke was weaker, as it says that someone trying to confront an adversary far more powerful with the foolish hope of turning them from the dark side, despite being warned, is something that's familiar to Luke. As I'll go over later, it's a bit odd to say which version of Luke this is talking about, but we do know that the only point he was actually trying to turn him from the dark side was in Return of the Jedi, rather than Empire Strikes Back. Lastly, Vader's also said to be the second most powerful in the galaxy next to Sidious, implying that he's number 2, Sidious number 1, and afterwards is Luke. Now, let's cover some of the counter-arguments against Vader's stance. Some of the statements for Luke's needing dark-side powers could just mean that without it, he would not be willing to kill, but with it, he is willing to, and is able to beat down his father. And just in general, anything for Vader doing well would only show that he was able to give up a fight, but Luke was overpowering him for the most part. Vader being off-guarded by Luke's savageness and Luke knocking him off his balance, probably just Luke getting a moment of outskilling him, and Snoke might not have credibility on Luke versus Vader, so his statement can be questioned if there's more evidence on the other side. As for the scan from The Last Jedi comic adaptation, this is almost certainly about Empire Strikes Back, as it talks about a master telling him not to fight an enemy, which is what happens in Empire, while in Return of the Jedi, we see the exact opposite, with Obi-Wan Yoda saying that he could fight Vader, as I covered before. While it is still weird because he wasn't trying to help Vader, I do think it makes more sense to go with the ESB interpretation. Lastly, let's cover some of the things that people use to say that they are equals. The most important statement says that they are equally strong and skilled as each other, with emotions being what determines things. This statement comes from Star Wars Jedi vs. Sith, and is easily the best statement for this stance. They're also called equally matched in the Skywalker saga, and the third fact file states that Luke had developed powers that equaled Vader. However, aside from the first one, the other equally matched stuff can be seen as in reference to conflicted Vader, or be questioned since Luke having an upper hand seems to be quite a bit more consistent. Now, finally, the thing you guys all came here for, who is actually stronger in my view. And this is very hard, and this is something I have deliberated on a lot. However, I will say, if they are not equal, I think that Vader has the better stance for being more powerful. It's quite direct, with there being many statements that a dark side Amp Luke is needed to beat Vader, who is explicitly conflicted. The interpretation of it just referring to Luke not being willing to kill or fight back much doesn't really work either, as it's more so saying that it's the only reason he's winning, not a reason he's winning. The fact that Vader can still put up a fight and was at the lower end of a very relative match in this state just goes to show that Vader likely is stronger. And while I do think that the statement from Jedi vs. Sith definitely makes it sound like when neither are affected by emotions they're equal, I think it's more consistent to go with what we see from the actual fight, as well as some of the statements mentioned before about Vader being second in power. But you could probably see those as in reference to political power, so I guess take that part as you will. For Luke's argument, I think the strongest points might be about him completing his training. Since the training directly was for Empire Strikes Back Vader, I think beating him is likely the training they referred to as Luke completing. In summary, Vader in Return of the Jedi is more powerful than Luke was in Return of the Jedi, and at worst was equal, and this Luke was very likely above Empire Strikes Back Vader. Now, that's all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks a whole lot for 300 subscribers. Let's keep on moving forward. Let's keep on trying to build up. I'm really excited to continue with some content. Gotta drop some shoutouts to my homies Highfather and Ataru. Links to their respective Instagram and YouTube channels will be down in the description below. Really good stuff there, and they helped me so much with this video. I actually do not think I could have had done without them. So please make sure to check them out. And have a nice day. Peace out.